While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn and son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger. On this first Sunday after Christmas, we remember the angels far and near sing tender lullabies, well-worn fabric full of years, hold in the warmth of parental love, animal and shepherd's crown and tie, glowing with adoration, while a muffled cry squeezes out to greet the world.
On this first Sunday after Christmas, we give thanks for every child among us. Each new birth, regardless of circumstances, reminds us of the preciousness of life, the potential of tomorrow, the promise of God. On this first Sunday after Christmas, we again light the Christ candle for the child King, the infant Redeemer, the Prince of Peace, the light of the world, and now we know Christ is born and nothing will ever be the same.
Verses 1, 2, and 4.
If you'd like. Yeah, you can sit there, and I'm going to sit right here to create some space. We've got a friend coming up here with us. You can come sit by Christian. This is Christian. Hi, what's your name? Jethro. Nice to meet you. Can I sit next to you? My name is Haley. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I brought something to show you today. Look at this. Oh boy, we have another friend. We've got a couple more friends. Here you go. I'll make some space. I'll scoot over. What do you notice about this bowl? It has scratches. Maybe some cracks. What color are the little repairs in the cracks? Brown. If you look closer, if they catch the light just right, yellowish brown, if you catch the light, you can see that it's actually gold. So this is a special bowl, okay? This bowl is called a kintsugi bowl. And it is a special Japanese art form. The word kintsugi means joining with gold. So I'm going to tell you the story about this bowl. So a long time ago in Japan, there was a leader called a shogun, and he had a favorite tea bowl, a lot like this. It was his favorite bowl. It was very special to him, and there were no other bowls like it. It was specially made just for him. And one day, he did something we've all done before. He dropped his bowl. What do you think happened to the bowl? It cracked. It broke into a bunch of different pieces. Now, this bowl was so special and so unique that he couldn't just go get another one at Target, okay? Instead, he needed to do something else. And so he got really creative, and he called in the best artists in the area, and he said, make something beautiful out of these broken pieces. And so what the artists did is they got tree sap, and they used it to glue the pieces of the bowl back together. And then they melted down gold, and they used the gold to cover that tree sap. And they made a beautiful bowl that reminds us that even when we make mistakes, even when our hearts break, we get really sad, God can put those broken pieces back together and make something even more beautiful than before out of it. And so we just celebrated a big holiday, didn't we? What did we just celebrate? Christmas. That's right. And what happens at Christmas time? What are we celebrating? The birth of Christ. Why did God come to earth? Why did God become a baby? You know? It's okay. Can I tell you what I think? Okay. Here's what I think. I think God came to this earth for 3 reasons, and they all start with C. The first is to connect with us. God came because God is just really, really fond of us. And God wants to connect with you. And the second thing is I think God came because God wants to create something beautiful out of each of us. Even when we have broken pieces, even when we make mistakes, even when we're sad, God sees those pieces and says, let's create something beautiful. And the third thing that I think God came to do is to celebrate what God is creating with me and you. Creating this beautiful world that you're making. So I brought you something today. Christian and I brought y'all a little heart repair kit, okay? God came into this world to repair this world and make it something beautiful. And so each of you gets a little heart repair kit. You can have one too, sweetheart. And here you go, Jethro, that's for you. And in this, you've got 4 little things, okay? So you have, the first thing you have is you have some thread. That's to remind you that God connects with you when you're hurting. God connects with you every single day, and you can connect with God too. The second thing is that you have in there is that you've got some clay, okay? You'll find some clay to remind you that God is always creating you to become more and more like Christ. You are always in the process of becoming something wonderful and beautiful, even if you make a mistake. And the third thing in there is that you've got some confetti poppers, because what's tonight? New Year's, that's right. And so those confetti poppers are to remind you that God celebrates you. And then you've also got some Band-Aids in there to remind you that things that seem broken can always be repaired. So can you remember what the 3 C's are? God came to, that's one of them. What's another one? Connect and celebrate. Very good. Amazing. Thank you all so much. Let's give them a round of applause. That was incredible memory. Will y'all pray with me? If you feel like closing your eyes, you can. Otherwise, you can leave them open, and y'all can just repeat after me. Dear God, happy birthday. Thank you for loving us, connecting with us, creating with us, and celebrating us. Help us to repair with others when we see them hurting too. Amen. All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you, and we're now going to have the gospel reading. And when we read from the gospel, we usually have people stand if they're able. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being is him, his life, and his life was a light to all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, and yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The Word of God for the people of God.
Well, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I am delighted and honored to be with you today. My name is Haley Feyerbacher, and the pronouns I use are she, her, hers. Will you join me in a word of prayer? Lord, may the words of our mouths today and going into this new year and the meditations of our hearts partner with you in your grand repair work that you are doing. May they be pleasing in your sight. May they be helpful and holy and life-giving. O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. When I was a little girl, my most prized possession was my big yellow stuffed bunny, who I named Scooby after my favorite cartoon, Scooby-Doo. Maybe you remember it. Now, Haley, as a 3-year-old, was a tiny girl with a lot of big feelings, not dissimilar from Haley as a 30-something-year-old who is now a big girl with just as many big feelings. And my feelings, both then and now, were always flying out of me. And young Haley, little Haley, literally flung her big emotions out with a ritual that I created when I was little. And I would perform this anytime I got angry. And it went like this. I would stomp to my room, slam my door, and then fling it open and hurl Scooby into the hallway. And each time my parents would die laughing at me, which just made me madder. Well, then one day, as my red-hot anger, I grabbed Scooby in my anger and I threw him hard, and something happened. Scooby's neck ripped. I had hurt the thing I loved the most. I burst into tears and I apologized to Scooby for hurting him, and I apologized to my parents for my anger, and I promised him and them that I would never do that again, and I begged my mother to fix Scooby. I was scared that Scooby would never be the same again, that he was broken, and that he would die. Well, I was right about one of those things and wrong about two of them. Scooby was never the same again, but he wasn't broken, and he didn't die. In fact, he's still with me. He's at home in my bed right now, waiting to comfort me every single night. And I can see the thread where my mother's skilled hands had slowly, carefully, artistically stitched Scooby back together. And there's still a small hole where my throw had ripped his head from his body. Small and inconsequential now, but still there. Scooby was never the same again, but he didn't need to be. And I was never the same again either, and I also didn't need to be. That was the last time I ever threw Scooby. Scooby was not fixed, he was repaired. Now I'm going to invite you to enter this story with me. And I'd like for you to raise your hand if you have at least one relationship that's important to you. Okay. Now for this next question, you can put your hands down. This next question, you don't need to raise your hand, okay? Just answer it internally. How many of you have ever experienced pain or disruption in this relationship, either because of something you've done or something the other person has done, or maybe just something in life in this world that has happened to you and impacted y'all? If I had asked you to raise your hand, every single person in this room would have raised theirs. This Christmas was about me raising my hand in response to that question. 2023 was a hard year for me. And as I entered the Advent season, it just seemed to get darker. My family and I have been struggling with some disruptions and disconnections, and I was scared and shattered. You know, maybe you felt this way before. Take comfort if you have, because I, the minister who specializes in helping people transform trauma into post-traumatic joy and justice, was in the running for chief messer-upper. And I've been broken before, but this time around, friends, I wondered if we were shattered beyond repair, if all of those edges of us that fit together had been ground down into dust. See, it's hard to hold dust. And I was so scared that the relationships with my sweet family, that were so precious to me. My most precious thing was going to be blown away and just slip through my fingers. We spent the week of Christmas doing deep work, sitting together, talking, listening more, trying to understand, getting fiercely truthful about what hurts and what we cannot do anymore, dragging every dirty secret, kicking and screaming into the light of love and holding each other's tears into the long hours of the night, and birthing something that feels like hope. Hope that our story isn't over and that we can write a new one, that the old story can be repaired, not fixed, because it will never be erased, but restitched and remolded and scarred over into something generative and beautiful and life-giving. Hope born in the middle of the night. I told my sister that this Christmas felt dark and hard and laborious and full of grief, and it was also perhaps the Christmasiest Christmas I've ever had. When I read John 1, it's no wonder that the exhausting labor that birthed our Christmas this year felt like Christmas for me. Because this text, John 1, is the song of Advent, of Christ coming down, and it's all about the deep work of repair. The story of God in this world is one of breathing us back to joy, and restitching us into right relationship, healing the wounds and traumas, and growing what gives life through intimate witness and love. This is the work of repair. And my goodness, our whole earth is crying out for repair. Every single one of us lives in a world bleeding for repair, and we don't know how to do it because our world has taught us to be ashamed of even needing this. Dr. Becky Kennedy talks about this in her work on repair when she says that every single one of us has yelled at someone that we love. And every single one of us has been yelled at by someone we love. And no one knows what to do next. And friends, what we're experiencing on the personal level in our families and friendships and even in ourselves, we are certainly experiencing collectively and systemically. Our world doesn't know what to do now with our wars, with our histories of slavery, with our homophobia and our patriarchy, our class divisions and poverty and homelessness and cold, hard hatred that are turning our sacred souls into shattered dust. Our world would much prefer we sweep that dust under the rug or play the blame game than do the skillful, intimate, painstaking work of repair and transformation. But John chapter 1. John 1 lights our pathway to repair, and through repair to the most beautiful story we could ever imagine. And here's the kicker. All of our English language Bibles have mistranslated this text so that we miss the power of this chapter. We miss the practical instruction on how to repair our world, ourselves, our relationships. Are you ready for it? We've been taught that this text reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, was with God, and the Word was God." But what we've translated to mean word, it doesn't actually mean word at all in the original language. It means conversation. In the beginning was the conversation. A conversation means literally to change with. A conversation is not a debate, it's not a monologue, it's not small talk, it's not just passing information back and forth. A conversation is about forming a relationship where listening and responding weave us together and change each member of this conversation. In a true conversation, we feel seen and heard. We meet the other as sacred and valuable, where you have something to share, and I have something worthy of sharing with you. In a conversation, I listen deeply and sensitively and humbly. I let go of a bit of what I used to think to make space for and include you, and let you in the conversation expand us to new possibilities. In conversation, it involves intimacy and risk and giving up of power because we don't control the other person's response or what we create together that emerges from that space. And in conversation, we change together, each of us becoming just a little bit different. And we create something new from that conversation, from turning to face one another in reciprocity and respect and care. In the beginning was the conversation, and the conversation was divine, John 1 says. And through this divine conversation, all things were brought to life and thrived, John 1 says. As it turns out, this is scientifically true too. Scientists are discovering that at the center of matter aren't things or substances, but relationships. Atomic particles swirling and dancing together and reacting and responding to one another, and reciprocal and mutual exchanges and relationships. A grand conversation. Our ecosystems, too, are life webs knit by conversations between trees and plants and animals and rain and streams and people. Spoken or unspoken, there are conversations going on all around us into which we are born and invited and needed, a tapestry in which we share experiences of love and grief and longing and intimacy. And it's this great conversation that has been disrupted and disconnected. And as Victoria Lures writes, restoring the conversation can repair the world. In the beginning was the conversation, and the conversation was with God, and the conversation was God. Conversation, my friends, is what the incarnation is. And the whole goal of this is to repair our story. We've experienced rupture. And our society and culture, even our churches, often don't know what to do. They rush to fix it, hoping that a simple apology, a diet of toxic positivity, or better yet, just ignoring it, will make the disconnection and pain a figment of our imagination. Or they rush to shame us because they train us to code corrections and conversations and confrontations as accusations that we are sinful and unlovable, deserving of the exile that we feel in our souls. This is unbearable, friends. When we don't know how to repair, the moment of disconnection lives in our bodies and souls. For example, I yell at my son for forgetting to do his homework and say, "You are so lazy, and you're gonna flunk out of college next year. What is wrong with you?" He runs to his room, and in the aftermath of this moment, I think, he's going to college next year. And in the remaining moments we have together, I've cut down his character and predicted a future of failure for him. What is wrong with me? If I don't repair, he sits alone in the disruption, overwhelmed and distressed. Psychologically, when we are left alone in our pain, our minds need a way to come back to feeling secure, and we do that by trying to make sense of what happened. What do? We create stories to explain it. And most of the time, especially when we're young, we create a story that sounds like this: I am harmful, and this is all my fault. It's better to be the villain than to live in a world where we cannot keep ourselves from being victimized, especially by those who are supposed to love us. If I let my son continue to believe this, and I don't do the work of repair, he's going to think there's no hope and that he is intrinsically harmful. And if he thinks this, he will struggle to engage in repair work when he hurts others. And that self-blame that you and I still do, it's the legacy of being left alone in disruption and us writing a self-soothing horror story. We have to repair the story. Stories are what matter most to us because it's not the events, but the stories we tell and have told to us that traumatize us. And it's story that heals us. We can't change events that happen, but we can change the stories we tell ourselves about those events. And we can change how we experience and respond to our memories of those events. If we can go back in our memories and begin thinking about what happened and about ourselves differently in those moments, and if we can help others think about this differently too, then the story can be edited. With repair, we replace the story of horror with a story of love and reparations and renewal. The disruption becomes a part of a story of repair that we co-write together through conversation as we become incarnate to one another, as we do what God did for us and does for us every single day. God didn't just take on our flesh to then, die and resurrect. No, the incarnation is about a divine conversation and the deepest act of empathy and self-giving compassion. God sat down with us in our darkness and lingered, listening, unafraid of our scars, our baggage, our secrets. God came to earth to repair the story, to write a different ending with us, to hand us the pen and say, "Tell me about your pain, and let's dream a story of healing to life." Conversation is the practice of incarnation. What it means to be incarnate to one another is to be unafraid of diving into the darkness of our disconnection and gazing at the wound, to invite the tough conversations we have in the mud and muck of our dust and our broken pieces when we notice where the rupture happened, and then ask, and now, what can we create together out of these broken pieces? And that shattered dust. Well, it turns out that dust is one of God's favorite creative mediums. With dust, God created humankind. With dust, God restored sight to the blind man at the pool of Siloam. And dust combined with water is clay. So when our tears mingle with our shatteredness, God forms us gently into something new and beautiful as the potter does her art. Repair is all of our work, but it takes so many different forms. The repair work is always work we do within ourselves. Sometimes it's done with others, but you're not obligated to do so if you're the victim of abuse. Repair work may look like reconciliation, it may not. Repair doesn't mean you're healed, it means you're moving towards wholeness. It invites reciprocity, but does not attach to it if the other person isn't willing. Sometimes it means returning, other times it means leaving. Sometimes it means reclaiming, other times it means deconstructing. It is not fixing, and it's more than an apology. Repair moves slowly and sacredly, first to knowing the disconnection, then knowing the pain, then knowing our role, then knowing what is our hopeful action that we are to take. Repair creates a new story that involves the old story, the old events told in a new light and a larger arc as it joins God's liberation story. So how do we do repair according to John 1? There are 4 parts of repair. They all begin with C. The first is connect at the point of disconnection. John 1 says the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Go into the darkness. Go back to the point of disconnection and ask, what was the rupture? What happened here? Step 2, become the conversation. Sit with all the parts of yourself and the parts of all those involved and listen actively. Acknowledge the impact. Take responsibility for what is yours. Apologize if appropriate. Affirm the feelings and sacredness of all the parts of you and all the parts of those involved. Become the conversation. Step 3, create action that gives life. In John 1, it says, Christ makes his home among us, creating life and hope and brave, safe space with us. And in the same way, we can ask how to grow what gives life in this space. What reparations can be made? What can we do to center the cause of healing as named by those who are hurting? This is your highest act of love, friends. And share your hopes for the story that y'all will write together. Create action that gives life. And step 4, celebrate your sacredness. God didn't make God's home amongst us because we're just pitiful or because we're flawless either, but because we're worth it. You're going to be tempted to tell yourselves horror stories of shame and blame, and so it's essential that in this work of repair, we separate our behavior from our identity. We can literally practice this with our hands. We can practice holding 2 truths at once and say, I am not proud of my actions or behaviors, and I am a good person. And then we take action to align our actions with who we are, with our identity. We can only create from a space of empowerment, of knowing that we are capable of writing a new story. And John 1 says, we have been authorized to be God's children, bearers of divine DNA, agents of the family business of repair and recreation and liberation. Connection, conversation, creation, celebration. This is how we repair the story. There's a story about a large ship that was experiencing serious engine malfunction, and the ship owners called numerous technicians to fix it, but none could figure out how to repair the engine. And then finally, one older repairman came out, and he spent several days just sitting with the complex equipment, learning it. And then finally, he took out a small hammer, and he tapped a single piece of equipment 3 times. Instantly, the engine began humming. It was repaired. When the ship owners received the bill, they were shocked to see that the man had charged them $10,000. They ask him to please resend the bill, itemized this time. And when the man sent the itemized invoice, it read, tapping the engine with hammer, $2. Knowing where to tap, $9,998. Conversation as incarnation is about learning where to tap. It isn't expedient or glossy like fixing. It's scarred and strong. Repair is about undertaking the slow, patient, painstaking process of noticing where the disconnection is and sitting with it long enough to begin to understand. It's the skillful process of not just mending, but recreating, reweaving a new story, integrating what has happened into who we will become in and with a Christ who is in the business of transformation. Repair requires incarnation, taking on wounded flesh and having the hard and healing and honest conversations. And for those of us who think it's too late, I have one final story. In 2020, my mother passed away, and my heart wasn't just broken, it was laden with shame. My mom and I were so close, but the week before she got really sick, I didn't take a couple of her calls. I didn't know she was dying, and I thought she was upset with me about something, and I avoided her calls. And after she passed, all I could think was that I should have known better. I should have been there for her. I should have done it differently. And one night, I couldn't take it anymore, and I called my friend Marcia, and I just laid all my shame at her feet. And Marcia kept telling me that I was there for her. I did the best I could with the information I have. I loved her completely, and she loved me. But I couldn't believe that because all these things just sounded very human, and I still believed that my mom deserved this transcended, perfect version of me that I had been taught for 30-something years was the only way that I could be non-harmful and holy and who God wanted and expected me to be. My mom, I thought, deserved this. And when I told Marcia this, she said, she forgives you for anything you feel like you did that wasn't a perfect expression of how you feel about her. And that's when I spoke the truth. But I don't want there to be anything she has to forgive. And Marcia said, it's a cheap love that never needs to forgive. Don't tell me a story of people who are perfect and never stumble. That doesn't transform me, and that doesn't transform this world. I can't find hope in that. Tell me a story that's real and messy. It's a cheap love that never needs to forgive. There's no expiration date on forgiveness or repair, and neither death nor life will ever make it impossible for God and us to repair the story. Take the small, slow, significant, sacred steps of reparation and recreation. Let's stop at nothing to write something better. And then tell me a real and messy story of repair, one that is costly and courageous. We can do this. I believe in God incarnate in us. What better way to start 2024 than with repair? Write the letters, make the phone calls, release what you've held hostage, and welcome home what you've exiled. Maybe you imagine writing this letter to yourself or someone you love, a love letter of incarnation and conversation, of repair and renewal. Maybe it sounds something like this. Hey there. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about your life. There's so many things that happened to you and happened between us that I know felt really bad to you. And you were right to feel that way. I want you to know that I am so sorry. Those moments weren't your fault. They were moments when I was struggling. And if I could go back, I'd take a moment to come back to myself, and then I would have gone to find you and be there for you and help you. If you're ever willing to talk to me, I'd love to listen. I won't listen to have a denial or defense. I'll listen to understand. I love you. Repair, not fixed. We'll never be the same again, but we don't need to be. We just need to be whole. And with Christ, it is never, ever too late. Begin the conversation and repair the story.
Now for our benediction. May this joy be yours as you hail Jesus Christ, your Messiah, your King. May you feel his peace as you accept that he is your Emmanuel. May he be your Lord, his love and light leading, guiding, and directing your path now and always.